So there are a few questions from Adil, I guess. He's in the. So I'll discuss. Some of the questions were already answered. I mean, we did that in the session, so I'll just do a quick recall to that. And rest of the questions, some needs a little explanation. I'll do that. All right. So the first question is, when importing the SAP tables, in the designer, there is an X mark next to those tables, so he's not able to run. Just give me a second, guys. Alright, so importing from SAP, when importing Mara and Marcy tables in the designer, I see X marks next to them. So that will be displayed, but it doesn't mean that the I was not able to import the tables from the designer. It could be something. Is the table already imported, Adil, or? No, it should allow you to import. I'm not sure, or if you can, ping me your credentials, I can connect to your server and check that out. What is wrong with these guys? App crash. You can ping me now, Adil. I can connect to your server straight in, because my server is still down. Yeah, can you give me the IP address? Right, on the SAP data store, when we try to search for the table, did you select the external data and contains T000006 search? Okay, anything is a table. It can be Mara, Marcy, Marty, or T0006, not a problem. I'm just randomly searching for a table. Okay, you should be able to import that straight from there. Let us see. Alright, so you go to the table and you will know the exact table name, right? So that is what you are searching for. It is unit of measure. it has a cross mark next to it. Right click and import it. It will be imported, and if you go to your T tables, why is it not showing here? Close. Yep, I think some issue with the system. You can either go and import by name or by search. You can do it both the options. Search, if you know half part of the total table name, or you are searching by description, and if you know the exact table name, you can go and import by name. That will import it into your system. So working on query transformation, can you be more clear on what errors that you are running into so that I can give you an answer for that? I'm looking at the log that I'm getting and gone that far that can help this. See, primary key violation, we spoke about that in a query transformation, Adil. So alright, so when you are trying to push data, yeah, I'm in the same job. So if you are trying to push the data from two different tables, right, and what kind of a join you gave? Inner join, and then here you are doing an inner join. So there is no need for you to do an inner join here when you are doing it in the where clause, either here or you can do it in one place. So I'm just removing it from here. You can select distinct, mapping, you want to do an order by, that's fine, advanced, okay, order by, where condition, alright, I think it is good, or I got an error. It says primary key violation, cannot insert a duplicate key into the orders completed, right? So the reason is it is trying to push the duplicate data into these two columns. One of these two columns, it can be order ID or customer ID. I think you can look at the description. You can reverse the primary key ID and rerun the job. It will run. Or if you are trying to, or if your requirement is to have the write records pushed in, you need to additionally check for the right join condition, right? So now there is no error in that one. Now how to cross check the data import from database without accessing the database. So if you don't have an access to database, you can go to your source data store, select the table, right click and click on view data, right? This is where you can go and look at the data, but unfortunately data services has a limit. It can show you only up to 1000 records. And to your next question, different ways of representing nulls. Yeah, I'm not sure which one. Can you inform me about that? So this is SAP system, and you're trying to post into that, it will not accept a null, so you need to push that as a forward slash, and once it is in the SAP system, if you just push a forward slash, SAP system recognize that as a null in the system. So how to go from an unsecure to a secure central repository? So this is actually done when you are trying to upgrade your repository from the repository manager. You go and you need to select your central repository, give all the credential details, and click on upgrade. It will take you to the secure central repository. By checking this enable security, you can give all the server details and click on upgrade. This will take you to or this will allow you to upgrade. And once the upgrade is done, you have to go and re-register that in the central management console. And once that is done, you have to go to the data services management console, central repositories, and you have to create users and groups. So I guess we already have 2 sessions on that central repository concept. So you can just refer to that, and if you still have any questions on that, you can ask me, Adil, how to handle a secure central repository. We spoke about it. While creating a central repository in Data Services Repository Manager, I accidentally choose local repository instead of central. Is there a way to fix it? See, when you are going through this process, and instead of selecting a central repository, you gave all the credentials of right. So in the repository, instead of selecting central repository, and you gave all the credentials of a central repository here, but you selected local repository. So that is the reason why I always suggested you to go and click on get version or upgrade, because if you are trying to go for a local, you cannot enable the security because this is grayed out. If it is a central, then only the security will be enabled. Right. So if you click on get version by passing all the credentials, you will definitely know if some of your credentials is wrong. Then definitely you can get a warning on the system saying that this is not correct. But if some of your credentials are correct, and by mistake, instead of clicking on get version or something, you clicked on create, it will go and create a local repository with all that information. So if you don't want to utilize that database for a local repository, you can pass the same credentials and select the central repository, right? Pass on the same credentials and click on create. It will drop and create all the content in the database. So you can go and still go ahead and use the same database for your central repository. Can I screenshot of job? Can appreciate it since I'm not able to see that in the video. So what we are trying to do in case, we are trying to split a single data set into multiple data set. So on the orders, you have a column like ship via 1, 2, and 3. Alright, you gave them correct, and just validate to see if there are any errors in this. Next, you need to create 3 tables, via 1, via 2, via 3. Right, and when you connect these case to this one, it will ask you the label ship via 1, 2, 3. You can connect and save and run the job, and these tables will be your template tables in your target data store, right? So you'll find these tables under your template tables. So now go to the merge data flow, select these tables, drag and drop them via 1, via 2, via 3, and you use a merge transformation to combine them into a single set. So all the questions answered, Adil? Yeah, okay, sorry. There's one more. Can I move a template table from one data store to another data store? So, okay, let me ask you this question. Why you want to do that? You can technically move, which means you are not moving, but you are trying to create the same table on another database or another data store. What you can do is, since I've done this via 1 on this one, so you just copy this one, create another table, right? Select another database and click on OK. Remove this connection, connect it and run. Technically this table will be created there also. Okay, or I created the wrong one. Okay, not a problem. You can delete that from here. Alright, if you have created that in the source, you can delete that and go to that, or if you have access to the database, you can just log into the database and give it a command called drop table name. It will drop that from the database. Okay, We good with the questions, Adil? Yeah, welcome, man. All right, guys. So if anyone of you have any questions, please go ahead and ask your questions. Adil, excuse me, can I use your repository for today because I don't have the other system working? Yeah, good. So what were we discussing in the last session? Can anyone of you just give me a heads up? Like, what were we talking about? Which topic are we talking about? Where are we? Like, I think we spoke about this one. Then we are talking about the data services management console. Is it?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Right. All right. So in the administrator, I guess we spoke about batch, and in the batch we spoke about the different options that we see in the repositories, right? Batch job configuration, schedule repository, and I think we told you about web services, SAP configurations, adapter instances. So SAP configuration, it's actually done by the basis guys. So what I will do, that goes far into the SAP systems because you need to log into the SAP system, create a logical system. Yeah, Chandu, you're asking for something? Yeah, I did not get you what you're saying. I'm not able to hear you, Chandra. No. Okay. Okay, sure. Go ahead. Okay, right. Let me know your question once you're ready. I can go ahead and answer that. So what we need to do is in the SAP system, we need to create some logical systems and then assign a port number, communication port, sender and receiver ports, what we call them. And once that is done, we need to get into our data services system, right? In the batch job, RFC interface status, we need to go to the configuration tab. Here we need to add and provide the RFC configuration. So what is the SAP program name, username and password, the application server name, the client on which you are working, the system number, and all these things. So once you provide this, security, server security, if your server to which you are trying to create an RFC connection has a server security, you need to pass all those credentials here and click on apply. And once this is done, you will be able to see the interface in RFC server interface status. You will see the RFC server name, and it will be in the orange color. And once you select that and click on start, it will just start. So what is RFC? First of all, RFC stands for a remote function call. So SAP systems, let us say SAP ABAP and BW systems, these two interact with each other with RFC communications, remote function calls. So all the SAP system internally speak to each other through RFCs, and since SAP acquired data services, it added the flavor of RFC to that. So Chandu, can you go on mute? I hear some echo from your end. In the status menu in the local repository, it's up here and with that mean no problem with the local repository working fine. So if you go to your status, so what is the status? Status says how your system is, right? So if any of your, so status of the repository. So let us say you're trying to run some jobs and as an administrator, I don't need to go and log into your system or to your logs and see, if your jobs are running fine or if you have any errors. So if any of your jobs which were scheduled failed or which you are running in your local repository failed, so this status turns red, which means there is some error or which there is some issue on your local repository. So that tracks the attention of the administrator, who can then go into your system and further look into it and then tell, okay, this is the reason why this job failed, right? So that is what we call as a status, Chandra. Okay, right. So once these RFCs are set up, so data services will be identified as an internal system to SAP, and it can easily communicate through this RFC interaction. So RFC interactions are a bit faster compared to the direct download and share directory. So remember, we spoke about these ones in your SAP data stores when we are creating. If you just go to this one in the advanced part, so this is what we get: direct download RFC, share directory FTP, and custom transfer. So this is where the RFC reflects, and it's a new add-on. You don't see it in the previous versions, right? So this is an RFC communication between the server. And adapters, we'll speak about it once we are talking about the XML data or real-time jobs. So server group. So this is a beautiful concept of servers, especially when you are working on clusters. So remember, I think most of you guys have the demo recording, right? So we spoke about something called as parallel processing and intelligent distributing process, right? So I just gave some theory about it today, but I'll try to show you what exactly it means. So let us say in a clustered environment, we don't install everything on one single machine. We will have multiple machines. So let us say this is on 3 different systems. I have installed 3 different job servers, JS1, JS2, and JS3. Now 3 different job servers, right? So this is why data services allows you to create job servers. Alright, this is where we go and create in the server manager. So when we create the job server, we choose the server on which we create, but by default it gets created on one single system because everything is installed on one single system in our landscapes. But on projects, on real landscapes, you'll create JS1, JS2, and JS3, and these 3 servers will have 3 different port numbers and 3 different ranges and stuff. Now, what is a server group? Alright. So server group is nothing but you bundle these 3 servers into one single group and you call this as server group 1. Right, so when you execute the job, instead of pointing your jobs to the job server 1 or job server 2 or job server 3, you will point it to the job server group. The reason why we generally do this process is when you are working with less number of folks, let us say 20 or 30 people in a project, you can directly assign that to one particular job server. It doesn't will have an impact on the performance. It depends on the volume and the time duration on which the jobs execute as well, and also it's directly proportional to your RAM on the system. But again, keeping those things in mind, let us say if you have a good configuration system and we have less number of people working on a project, you can map all of them to one single job server. But if you have more number of people, what will happen? So requests from user 1, user 2, user 3, and so on will occupy almost the entire server space. The request. And there is less amount of space left, so the new request will not be processed. So they have to wait in queue. So last in first out, LIFO and FIFO, first in first out. So we need the stack processes, right? So on the server, so they keep waiting till the other job which is completed will go ahead and release those resources so that the other job can get into the stack. So in this process, what we will do, if more number of people are running their jobs, the jobs will get into the queue and they keep waiting for the first previous jobs to release or release the system space or the threads or the processes that they are using in the backend. So if you have to, manually switch your job to other job server or other job server, you need to, you cannot go ahead and schedule that, but you need to manually run them. So to avoid all this process, instead of pointing to a particular job server, you can point to this job server group, and this job server, in every 5 seconds, it will collect the stats from server. So what kind of stats it will collect? So it will check which is the system, the most ideal job server out of JS1, JS2 and JS3, or you can have 4 more job servers as well. So out of this cluster, which job server is the most ideal? So based on that, let us say JS3 is the most ideal, then JS2 is the most ideal, and then JS1 is the most ideal. So next job that anybody executes, it reroutes it to the JS3 and then push it another job to the JS3, and then in next 5 seconds it will calculate which is the most ideal job server, then JS2. So it evenly distributes the load onto the servers. So by the time the JS1 will be freed up, and it will process the job to the JS1. So this is an automatic and intelligent distribution processing that is done in the back end of the system. Right. So this is done with the help of the server group. So to create a server group, go to the server groups and click on all server groups, go to the configuration. So remember, we need to be on a cluster to add different server groups. So you can go and give the repository name to which you are trying to assign the server group, and the server group generally starts with SG, right, and get followed by the repository name. You can go and select the repository, and you need to have more than one physical machines on which your job servers are created. So you can select all and click on apply, right, so that your server group will be created, right, and go to the server group status and check if the status is green. Now when you execute the job, right, you will see a new thing called as server group, right. You can go and select either a job server, or you can go and select the server group on which you want to run this job. So this is done, this intelligent distribution is done through this one, and even when you are scheduling this from the batch tab, you get to go and choose your job server or your server group. You can go and choose this from this one, or when you execute from the data services management console, you get to select your server group. So this is one of the most important and interesting thing, especially when you are working on the large landscapes. You will get an opportunity to work on these kind of scenarios to improve the performance and to optimize the job execution. Right, adapter instances. So this will be activated when you, in your server, I think we spoke about this when we are creating the job server. Click on configuration editor, and when you set the adapter instances as yes, right, these two should be checked So whenever you are trying to create, so generally the job servers are done by the administrators in the initial days of the project. So if you are working in that team, just make sure you check these two because they are pretty much useful for the later part. So once you create that without enhancing these two, probably you'll not be in a position. Some servers allow you to do that, some servers will not allow you to do that. So just make sure you check these two when you are creating. And when those adapter instances are enabled, then you can see these adapter instances on your system which talk about the instance, which means on your particular job server the adapter is configured and active, so your web services can work on this one. So when you are dealing with web services, you need to have your adapters or adapter instances active and working. Alright, so we spoke about the central repository in and out. Then next one is the object promotion. So what is object promotion? We spoke about this when we are talking about the central repository. Moving the code from one instance to another instance is called object promotion. So generally you will go with the concept of central repositories, but in some projects, they'll not have central repository, or there is one recent situation that we have to promote a code without pushing it into the central repository because this is some other scenario that we have been testing. So in those cases, when you want to move code from one repository to another, from designer you can do that, right? So let us say I want to push this data store into some other local repository. I can say export. So it's not just the data store, I can do job, project, anything. Select, and I can say export to repository. And give the username, password, click on login, select other repository, click on next, and give the repository password. Alright, and then I can select all the objects or just exclude only the tables and just pass only the data store to that repository. So once I click on finish, the export will be done and this data store is pushed on to other local repository. I can do that at a project level as well. So the same activity in a different pattern, if you want to do that, you can do the object promotion here. So export object or export substitution parameters, export system configurations or import. So you can go with the objects, substitution, system configurations. I think we spoke about this, data store configurations and system configurations. We'll have a quick glance on the substitution parameters before we go with the objects promotion. So remember, when we create a global variable, right, I spoke about this, when we create a global variable, we create at a job level so that it can be called across the job. But there will be few parameters like the inbound directory path, the outbound directory path, the error report path, the data dictionary path. So these kind of things, they will be common for the entire local repository. Right, they are not specific to job, but they are at a repository level. So if you want to create some global variable at a repository level, instead of calling them as global variables, we call them as system parameters or substitution parameters. So you can go to tools and you can go to substitution parameters, and this is where I can create a new substitution parameter the same way you create the configurations on your data store. Right, give the name and substitution parameter is represented by $, and you can give the path of it or the meaning of it. Right, you just pass it, and you can pass multiple configurations and click on OK. And you want to export these configurations, the system configurations, you can go and select the system configurations and click on next. Generally we export the objects, and substitution parameters and system configurations, these are done by the administrators because they need to be set to the default before you export them. Right, so select the object, click on next. No repository is configured for export. Okay, so export configuration. So the configuration is not done, so you need to go and configure. So when you click on export configuration, it says two tabs. One is FTP and shared directory. So when I export work or objects from my local repository, I can export them to an FTP if I have an access to one FTP, or to a shared directory on the server. Yes, Chandra, correct. So I can push them to a shared directory. Alright. Give the name and give some path on your C drive, or generally it will be your network path. So since we don't have any network, I'm just giving this path to 3. Oops, sorry. Okay, data files. Alright, and then you select the repository from which you want to move and click on save. So this configures your FTP. Now the second thing, if you want to import from the same FTP, so when you are trying to export, so you need to configure your export server and then go to the object promotion, export objects, click on next. Now you will be able to see to which repository and what are the type of objects that you are trying to send. Is that a data flow? Select it, click on next. Then you will see all the data flows, right? Shared directory, you can select this one and click on export, and once the exportation is done, you'll get a confirmation. It is still in the process of exporting. When it is done, it will show you completed. Right, so this is how you move from your local repository to a shared directory or an FTP, from where the other systems can access them. So for you to access, you need to go and create the import configuration, save, go to the objects, and then you say import, next. It will take you to the repository, right? Then df case is the one that we have exported from one repository, so you want to read it. So instead of using your central repository, if you are afraid that your central repository will be overwritten with your work that you are trying to do, and you want to protect that work, so you can use this process as well. Right, you can write into a shared directory or an FTP, and this is a new add-on from Data Services 4X. This was not present in the previous versions. Alright, next one is the management, and management is typically the administrator's role. Right, how administrator manage without logging into your local repository. So under the management, initially you have something called as local repositories or repositories tab in the 3x version, which means you typically go and register your local repository in the Data Services Management Console in the version 3.0 and 3.2, which I call as 3x. But from the version 4x, the integration of CMC Central Management Console to the Data Services is done. So you are actually registering your local repository in the Central Management Console, and it gets reflected under your patch. But previously, in the previous versions, you have to go and register your repository here, then only it gets displayed here. Right. So apart from that, if you click on the or expand the data stores, you'll see the local repositories here. So let us say I corrupted my password in my local repository and I asked my administrator to reset the password. So there is no need for him to go into your local repository, technically log into your local repository and do that. He can go to the management, expand the data stores, click on my repository, and he can choose which data store he wants to change. Right, and then we can go and change the configuration as well and set something to default, and there he can go and change the username and password, And once he's done with this, click on apply, and your changes will be reflected in your local repository as well. So this is where administrator can go and change your passwords in your data store, just in case if we messed up and locked our data stores with the wrong password. So this is where the administrators can go into individual repositories and change the passwords. Then file locations, right? So generally when you are creating some does not contain a file, select another repository. Okay, that's bad. Okay, so probably they are not configured on yours. So for SQL Server database there is no option, no CDC. What is sorry, what are you trying to ask, Chandra? I did not get. For SQL databases there is no CDC, change data capture, right? Database type, no CDC. So especially CDCs are, right, so they are change data captures, right? So your system should enable that, or your system should have them enabled, or your system should support those things. So when you are on a system which supports your this thing, you can enable the change data captures from the database. Okay, and then file locations. Generally when we work on your local repository, let us say when I'm running the job, I say collect my statistics, where they will be collected. So they have to go and run on your system in some location. So that is where these files will be created, but I don't see this, or it's created through some admin account, so we are not able to see that one here. So substitution parameters per repository, the administrator can go and change them here. So we saw them from the local repository. You go to tools and then go to the substitution parameters and change the value. Administrators can do that from substitution parameters, go to the repository and change the value or create a new substitution parameter or configuration for that one. And then report server configuration. So when you run your jobs, some statistic reports, right? So that is the path for this one. And when you are, so let us say we created some data quality transformation, and when we ran it, it created some reports in the backend. So this is the path and the type of the file that where they will be saved. So if you go to this one, the quality reports, so those quality reports will be exported in the form of, sorry, I think. Okay, I think we don't have access to this one. Probably we can directly look into the server. So this is the path where the files will be generated, and they will be generated in a rich text format or a PDF, and the language to which they will be written is English, and this will be the host name, the server name, and the communication to port to write into this particular directory or a folder where this reports will be configured. So access server we will look at when we are working on the XML data. We will look at all these things, instances, access servers, and all these things together. Then profiler configuration, right? So what is a profiler repository? So profiler repository, you can see this one. I haven't done one yet, but this is not that mandatory, but some projects, they ask you to create some statistics on the data. So what you do, you create a profiler repository. Guess we are getting into too many details. Alright, so once you create a database, you go to give your server name, and click on get version. You'll not have any, then go and create one. And once you create this one, you can register that in the central management console. And once your profiler repository is registered in your central management console, business intelligence, platform, client tools, not client, platform 4. Okay, so it's still working. So what we typically do with this, it is just the same as we create your data services local and central repository. So once it is created, you go and register that in the central management console as a profiler repository, and the backend database is Microsoft SQL Server. The database db_prof. Is that pro or prof we created? PRO. Okay, so now earlier we keep this as no, but now we keep this as yes, and profiler server and the port number (8080) and click on test connections. Alright, successfully connected to this and save the connection, and this will be registered as your profiler repository. And once this is done, as the way we configured our central repository, profiler can be configured from here. Right next to your job server, there is a small box with a cross mark on it which says, when you move your mouse on this, on the left corner you'll say profiler is not running. Double click on this and give the username and password and click on login. You'll see the profiler repository here. Click on OK. Give the username and or database password and click on OK. Connected to the profiler server. What is wrong? Okay, so try it on your systems, guys. It's just a password that you need to pass, or I'm not sure. Connecting to the profiler. Right. So once you give that, your profiler will be connected, and if you want to do some profiling activity on your data, so submit for column profile request or relationship profile request within this one. So click on column profile request and check what are you trying to check. Detailed profiling on all these columns or specific columns, and click on submit. And once your report is done, so this is saying that it is not available, the repository is not available, you can go and look into see. Start the task, because no job server is found, job server is not associated. So you can link all these things, and once you do this profiling activity, you can see the stats of that, or the profile of that table. So what is that table all about? How many columns are there? How many primary keys are there? How many nulls are there? So the statistics on the table. So that is what we do using a profiler. And back to where we started. So you can see those statistics or configurations here. Right, profiling size on all sample rows on which it will do, and the number of distinct values that it will check for. You can go and change the values here if you want. Right, status intervals. So where did we see this screen? So this is something that we saw from the batch. When you click on this, it will show you one of this as a default, like last execution or last 5 days of execution or all executions. So this is where you go and set that status interval. So you can, for real-time display, it is like last execution of the job, and batch job display, it is like last execution of the job, and click on apply and go to your batch. Right, so you will see the last execution of the job as a default option. Alright, and the CMS connection. So this is where you connect to your Central Management Console CMS servers, and all the certification logs per repository will be saved here in this path. If you go and click on that, so sometimes if the certifications are void or if they expire, you will not be able to log into your repository or run most of your activities. And the last one here is job execution history. So this talks about the entire landscape execution history. This is not specific to a particular repository or a particular this thing. So this is across the landscape. So if an administrator wants to see, irrespective of logging into individual, even in the batch we have to go into individual repository and see what is happening. But if you want to see at the entire landscape level what is happening, you can go and see that here. Right, and you can switch between a particular job to all jobs, and you can see how many days of execution history you are looking at. Then this is the job execution history, and it will tell you the execution time for each and every job and on which configuration it ran for. And then you can go to the data flow level execution history and see what exactly happened on each and every data flow, how many seconds it ran for, and how many records it fetched, and how many records were loaded as a part of it. Right, so this is on the entire landscape. So if you have 10 local repositories, you'll have all the stats of jobs and data flows for those 10 local repositories. And this is your home button, which will take you back to the home page. So that's about your administrator. Manages your production environment, including batch job execution, real-time services, web services, adapters. So the second line, guys, except server group, we spoke about server group except all these things, which we will talk about that when we are talking about the real-time jobs and central and profiler repositories and more. So this is a typical administration tab which will allow you to manipulate or maintain or handle the entire landscape at different levels and different activities. So once you start working on a long-term project, right, you will never know like what kind of situation you might run into, and this is one single handle or one single tool, I can say, using which we can go back to different levels, go back to different repositories and handle different kind of issues. Right, so that is just with the administrator. So tomorrow we'll see about the auto documentation, data validation, impact and lineage analysis, operational dashboards, and data quality reports. So any questions on the topics that we discussed in today's session?
Rakesh, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, Chandra, go ahead.
In Desire లో మనకు కొన్ని ఉన్నాయి, ఒకసారి చూస్తారా? డిజైర్ ఓపెన్ చేస్తారా?
Yeah.
అక్కడ మనకి ఇక్కడ ట్రై అనేది ఒకటి, తర్వాత లాస్ట్ ఉన్నాయి.
We'll talk about that a little later, Chandra. Manaki, we have different scenarios which we'll be talking about try and catch. So try and catch, on a very simple, it is nothing but, if you are trying to, when your job fails, it gives a reason why it is failure or why your job is failing. So you want to catch that reason and try to send it through, or you want to catch that exception why this job is failed. So you can use a try and catch. So catch will catch those exceptions why it is failing, and based on that you can do a subsequent activity, like you can trigger an email, or you can do, if this fails, go for that process, or second job should trigger. So you can do all these activities using try and catch. So I have a good example for that. We'll talk about that when we are talking about the project orientation.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions, guys? Alright then, so we'll connect in tomorrow's session. Alright, so belated Christmas wishes and happy holidays for those people who are enjoying their holidays. Alright, so since you are in holidays, I really recommend you guys to practice well, and Adil, thanks for your local repository. So just in case if I'm not able to connect to the actual server on which I am teaching, so I will require your repository to continue with the session. Alright guys, so thanks for joining today's session, and hope to see you soon in tomorrow's session. Till then, take care and bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.